Hey guys, welcome to the Legendary Arcade Stick series. Today, I have the Japanese Virtua Stick for the Sega Saturn and the much later release for the PlayStation 2. So let's get into it. Fight! So the Virtua Stick for the Sega Saturn. Such a legendary stick, so many people talk about this thing. This is the Japanese release. Now there's also an American release, which is black and purple, but that's pretty much total crap. This is really the one you're gonna wanna go for, also known as model HSS0136. Now there's also a bigger brother of this, which is a double stick known as the Virtua Stick Pro, and that is model number HSS0130. And while that stick is certainly awesome, the smaller HSS0136 here is super cool, if not only for its unique layout. It comes with a solid metal top plate. The base of it and the body is basically just one molded white piece of plastic. It has a solid, metal bottom plate as well. You have your turbo switches on top with a speed dial. You have a start button. You'll see here the button layout is a little non-traditional, but it's basically a Sega two-player layout with your extra trigger buttons on the bottom here, which is basically your L1 and L2. Now for the Sega Saturn, they mounted the joystick lower because they kind of expect you to mainly play on the bottom set here. But I would say there's a lot of ways you can configure this thing. So if you want to play on 6 buttons for say Street Fighter 03 or whatever, you can use these 6 up here, and they feel great. Or if you're maybe playing a 4-button Neo Geo game or a 4-button shooter, you could just do those 4 right there. And what I actually like is the 3 up top, and I use my thumb for the bottom one. Now, if you wanted to, use this thing for another console that needed a home button, obviously you would need to add that. And if you needed a select button, you would need to add that because you only have the start button. It comes with Sega style buttons, which I highly recommend swapping them for Famitsu or Sanwa buttons, but they are also soldered to the PCB. Those are pretty easy to modify. You just desolder them and attach them to new buttons. The harder part is that these Sega buttons that originally came in here are not 30 millimeter. They're like 28 or 29 or something like that. So you actually have to Dremel these button holes out wider to fit 30 millimeter buttons, which are all of the Famitsus and Sanwas. Now, I've found that this art peels not only on the edges by the screws, but if you're gonna try and put better buttons in and you're widening it out with a Dremel, you gotta go really slow. Don't let the art heat up too much or it will shrivel up and it'll look terrible, so take it slow. So the art really sucks, which is why you can see here what I did is I just removed the art because when I got it, it was peeling all over the place. And then I just sanded it down and just added a nice clear coat of paint, and I think it looks pretty badass. So what joystick is this? Well, that's a good question. In most cases, a Famitsu LS56 joystick, but many of these versions, and they look identical, comes with an ASCII joystick, which are not as good. Now, the way you tell is you have to look under the shaft dust cover. So you're just gonna look at that little white circle there, also known as the pivot, and if it has notches in it, like a gear shape, that means it's an ASCII style stick. And if it's a smooth white circle with no notches, that means it's a Famitsu style stick, and that's the one you're gonna wanna go for. Another big downside to the art is that the joystick was mounted on the top plate using countersinked holes. Well, the shit thing about that is they put the art over the top of it. So if you wanna get to the joystick, you basically can't take out the whole thing. You have to open up the stick and you can change out things like the spring and other things like that, but you can't actually totally remove this stick. So the only way you can take this thing off is to take this art off. What a lot of people don't know is that much later on, they re-released the Virtua Stick for the PlayStation 2. The model number on the PlayStation 2 version is the CS10002, this time with a black and gray design. Another cool thing is they added a select button and also a turbo button, but essentially the body and the ergonomics are exactly the same. Same button layout, same placement of the joystick. But the coolest part about the PS2 version is that it comes stock with all Famitsu parts, the joystick and the buttons. Plus, the buttons are not soldered to the PCB, it has quick disconnect stock, and the holes are already set for 30 millimeters. The only downside is they still mounted the damn joystick underneath the art. So the only way you can take this thing off is to take this art off, which kind of sucks. Another downside to the PS2 version is that it's actually quite rare and many times pretty expensive when it shows up, but if you can find one for a good deal, definitely snag it. I also wanted to mention the PC version, which came out at the same time as the PS2 version, so it comes with all Famitsu parts, has a turbo button, and the original art style other than the Sega Saturn logo. It really is a cool stick. There was also a third-party release called the DC Game Mate for the Dreamcast, but I wasn't a big fan of some of the art choices. Okay, so here's the inside of the Sega Saturn version. Here's your PCB for the Sega Saturn that I've already desoldered, obviously, and I added quick disconnects for the Famitsu push buttons that I added. Here's the LS56 that's mounted on the front side, which is a huge pain in the ass because it's under the art. The daughter board for your start button. And as you can see here, you actually have a good amount of room here if you did want to add a different PCB or a pad hack or whatever you want to do, a dual mod. You got plenty of room here. But again, this is a really easy way that I highly recommend that if you do own this stick, to just swap out for new buttons. You know, it's pretty easy. You just desolder each one of these points, pull this board off, put some new wires to each one of these points with some quick disconnects, and you throw in your push buttons or your screw-on buttons, whatever you want to do. That's this guy. So now let's check out the PS2 version. All right, guys, so here is the PlayStation 2 version. Now, this is all of the wiring that came with my stick when I got it. Obviously, it's a jumbled mess here. I need to clean this up and kind of redo the wiring. But either way, this is the original quick disconnects and everything that this came with. I just simply put new buttons in there, new screw-on Famitsus. This is the LS56 that comes stock with it. As you can see here, here's the PlayStation 2 PCB. It's so small. There's plenty of space that you can do stuff with here on the inside. But as I always say, I love keeping the PlayStation or PlayStation 2 PCBs because you can have adapters to play on just about anything. All right, guys, so that was the Japanese release of the Virtua Stick for the Sega Saturn and the re-release for the PlayStation 2. Either way you go, it's really cool to own one of these. I mean, it's a Sega arcade stick. I love them. I think they're awesome. And you know what? There's so many other legendary arcade sticks to talk about, so many more videos, so check them out, and I'll see you next time.